Have you ever wondered what it felt like to sense something beyond the tangible world millions of years ago? Imagine standing under a vast, star-strewn sky, the wind whispering through ancient trees, and feeling an inexplicable connection to something larger than yourself. This was the beginning of spiritual awareness in early humans, a subtle, almost instinctive recognition that life was intertwined with unseen forces. Archaeologists and anthropologists suggest that this awareness did not emerge overnight. It evolved as humans began to interpret the mysteries of their environment not just as threats or resources, but as signs of something sacred. Evidence points to early humans exhibiting behaviors that hint at a nascent spirituality. Careful handling of animal bones, the placement of stones in specific patterns, and early forms of art that seem to go beyond mere decoration. Could these actions have been attempts to communicate with or appease unseen powers, seeking protection from the dangers of the wild? The idea that death, disease, and natural disasters were not random, but rather messages from a higher force, might have driven these primitive rituals. Every flicker of lightning, every sudden roar in the forest may have been perceived as a signal, prompting an early human to pause, reflect, or even offer a small token of respect. This awareness of the sacred also likely had a social dimension. Groups that recognized patterns in nature and acted to respect or interpret them may have had a survival advantage. Leaders or shamans might have emerged, individuals whose sensitivity to these divine signs allowed them to guide the community, fostering cohesion and a shared sense of meaning in an otherwise unpredictable world. Spirituality, then, was both personal and collective, a force weaving the threads of early human society together. As we trace these earliest forms of faith, it becomes clear that the urge to understand protection and divine intervention is as ancient as humanity itself. Every etched symbol on a cave wall, every carefully placed stone, was an attempt to reach beyond the material and touch the eternal. Early humans weren't just surviving, they were searching, questioning, and striving to make sense of existence through a spiritual lens. If this glimpse into the dawn of human spirituality fascinates you, I want to hear your thoughts. What signs of the divine do you think our ancestors might have noticed in nature? Leave a comment below. Smash that like button if you enjoyed this journey, and make sure to subscribe for the next chapter of our exploration into the first sparks of faith. Long before cities and organized religions, early humans engaged in rituals that reflected both fear and reverence, gestures that might have seemed simple but were profound in meaning. Imagine a small band of hunter-gatherers returning to a familiar clearing after a successful hunt. The placement of a particular bone, the marking of a tree, or the scattering of earth could have been more than habit. It was an offering, a way to honor forces they sensed but could not see. These rituals were intimate dialogues with the environment, where every action carried symbolic weight, blending survival with the first glimmers of spiritual reflection. Anthropologists argue that such practices were not random. Patterns emerged suggesting that these gestures were repeated across generations, hinting at shared beliefs and early attempts to influence fate or seek protection. Objects discovered in archaeological sites, from carefully arranged stones to remnants of fire pits surrounded by artifacts, indicate that early humans had a consciousness that extended beyond the immediate moment. These rituals might have been intended to ensure the continuation of life, appease the spirits of animals taken during hunting, or simply to maintain harmony within the natural world. The repetition of gestures, clapping hands, chanting, or dancing in rhythm could have created a sense of order in the chaos of survival, bridging the gap between the seen and the unseen. Over time, these rituals became codified, passed down as traditions even before language fully developed to explain their meanings. Interestingly, early rituals also show a remarkable sensitivity to timing and celestial events. Certain caves align with solstices, and gatherings often coincide with lunar cycles. This suggests that humans were already observing patterns, seeking protective power by harmonizing with natural rhythms. Even without written records, these actions reveal a sophisticated understanding of cause, effect, and symbolic communication, a primitive yet deeply meaningful form of faith. Rituals allowed humans not only to confront fear, but also to create a narrative in which they were participants in a larger cosmic story, connecting the individual to the community and the world around them. Through these early rituals, we see a species learning to navigate uncertainty with creativity and reverence. In each gesture, each carefully chosen symbol, there is evidence of the first spiritual consciousness. Humans were no longer simply reacting to the environment, they were beginning to interpret it, to seek patterns, and to engage with forces beyond their control. The seeds of all subsequent religious thought lie in these early practices, laying the foundation for how humanity would later seek protection, understanding, and meaning in the vast, unpredictable world. As early humans sought to understand the world around them, symbols and totems became powerful tools for expressing concepts that words could not yet capture. Imagine a figure carved into a piece of bone or painted on a cave wall, not merely decoration, but a representation of protection, of a spirit, or of forces beyond comprehension. Totems, whether depicting animals, natural elements, or abstract patterns, served as anchors for belief, allowing humans to focus their hopes, fears, and prayers on a tangible object. Each mark carried meaning, a coded message about survival, guidance, or divine favor, passed down through generations and evolving alongside human cognition. Symbols were not limited to static objects. They also appeared in movement, rhythm, and sound. Drumming, chanting, or repetitive gestures created a shared language of faith, one that transcended spoken words. Anthropologists suggest that these expressions of spirituality were as much about reinforcing social bonds as they were about seeking protection from unseen forces. By gathering together and participating in symbolic acts, early humans fostered a collective consciousness where the community's understanding of safety, destiny, and the divine was mutually reinforced. The choice of animals or motifs in early symbols often reflected the environment and perceived powers of those beings. A bear, for instance, could represent strength and protection, while birds might symbolize freedom or guidance. By invoking these symbols, humans externalized their desires and fears, projecting them onto forms they could recognize and relate to. In this way, totems and symbols were not merely art. They were instruments of meaning-making, cognitive bridges linking the tangible and intangible worlds. Evidence from archaeological sites shows that symbols were sometimes combined with natural features, such as rocks, caves, or bodies of water, creating sacred spaces that amplified their perceived power. These early sacred sites became focal points for ritual, contemplation, and social cohesion. They were not just places of worship, they were laboratories of human imagination, where abstract thought met practical survival, and where belief became a strategy as well as an expression of wonder. Through symbols and totems, early humans learned to interpret the world as a tapestry of signs, weaving protection, hope, and faith into the fabric of daily life. The echoes of this symbolic consciousness are still with us today, in art, ritual, and the ways we seek meaning beyond what is immediately visible. For early humans, nature itself was a canvas of messages, a living archive of signs that could warn, protect, or guide. The wind rustling through the trees, the sudden cry of an animal, or the pattern of stars overhead was not merely background noise. It was a communication channel from the unseen world. Imagine standing on the edge of a cliff as storm clouds gather. To our ancestors, this might have been more than weather. It was a signal to seek shelter, to pay respect, or to interpret the forces controlling their fate. These signs of divine protection were read not with instruments or written texts, but with acute observation, intuition, and a deep, almost instinctive understanding of the interconnectedness of life. The interpretation of these natural cues required careful attention and collective memory. Groups that successfully recognized patterns when an eclipse might signal change, when animal migrations indicated seasonal shifts, gained a subtle yet crucial advantage. Over time, these observations became intertwined with spiritual belief, where the patterns of nature were seen as deliberate messages from protective forces. Certain animals, such as wolves or birds, were not merely part of the environment. They were messengers, guides, or symbols of guardianship. By watching, listening, and remembering, early humans began to construct a framework of understanding that blended survival with the sacred. Interestingly, these interpretations were often codified through ritual. Repetition of gestures, songs, or offerings in response to natural phenomena reinforced the belief that the humans were in dialogue with powerful forces. A sudden rainstorm might prompt a communal dance. A lunar eclipse could inspire a vigil or silent meditation. Each action was a conscious attempt to align with the perceived will of nature and its protective powers, a testament to the evolving spiritual intelligence of early humanity. Nature was not passive. It was alive, speaking to those willing to listen, and those early humans who could read its language were seen as wise, sometimes revered figures within their communities. Through this lens, the natural world was both classroom and sanctuary, offering lessons in caution, guidance, and divine protection. It encouraged observation, reflection, and respect, a form of early spirituality deeply rooted in the material world but reaching for the immaterial. How did they discern which signs to trust? Which animals were truly guardians? Which storms carried messages? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What signs of nature do you think our distant ancestors revered or feared? Share your perspective in the comments below. Cave walls, illuminated by flickering firelight, became more than shelters. They became canvases for the spiritual imagination of early humans. The images etched and painted within these rocky confines reveal not only a fascination with the natural world, but also a deep engagement with the unseen. Imagine standing in front of a depiction of a mighty bison or a hunting scene, knowing that each stroke was more than observation. It was an attempt to influence reality, to seek protection, or to communicate with forces beyond human comprehension. These visual narratives were storytelling before language, a bridge connecting the mundane with the divine. The patterns and motifs often reveal repeated themes: animals that were central to survival, abstract symbols that seemed to carry encoded meanings, and scenes of human interaction with the environment. Scholars suggest that this art was not purely aesthetic, but served functional spiritual purposes. By representing animals on the walls of caves, early humans may have believed they were invoking their spirits, ensuring protection, fertility, or successful hunts. Each image was a careful act of intention, a ritual embedded in pigment and stone, hinting at a consciousness that recognized cause, effect, and symbolic power. The act of creating these cave paintings itself was transformative. Firelight dancing over figures, shadows stretching and contracting, could create a sense of presence, as if the spirits of the animals were alive within the walls. This immersive experience reinforced belief, guiding early humans to perceive the world as imbued with protection and purpose. The cave, then was not just a refuge from the elements, but a sacred space where human and divine interacted, a laboratory for faith, imagination, and community cohesion. Moreover, cave art reflects a shared understanding among group members. The repetition of symbols across regions suggests that early humans were communicating and standardizing spiritual ideas long before written language. These visual narratives became repositories of knowledge, conveying lessons, warnings, and protective wisdom across generations. The caves were memory keepers, safeguarding a spiritual and practical understanding of survival, divine intervention, and human responsibility within the natural world. Through this intertwining of art, ritual, and observation, early humans developed a sophisticated way to engage with the mysteries of life. Cave art was not simply decoration, it was a mirror reflecting the earliest attempts to reconcile the fragility of human existence with the protective forces they felt surrounding them. In each painted animal, each symbolic gesture, there is evidence of the first conscious dialogue between humanity and the divine. As early humans navigated the world of the seen and unseen, certain individuals emerged as guides, those we now call shamans or spiritual leaders. Imagine someone in the tribe who perceives patterns others miss, the subtle shifts in weather, the behavior of animals, or the recurring images in dreams. These figures held a unique position, mediating between the human community and the invisible forces they believed governed survival and protection. Their authority was not written, but earned through intuition, experience, and a reputation for interpreting signs correctly, often providing reassurance in the face of danger. Shamans acted as both healers and spiritual interpreters. When illness struck or hunting faltered, the community turned to these individuals to communicate with the protective powers, seeking guidance or intervention. Their rituals could include chanting, dance, and the use of symbolic objects, stones, feathers, bones, each selected for its perceived connection to a higher realm. Through these practices, the shaman translated the language of nature into actionable advice, giving meaning to events that otherwise seemed random and chaotic. This role blurred the line between practicality and spirituality, demonstrating an early understanding that protection and survival were intertwined with belief and ritual. Archaeological evidence supports this notion, revealing sites where special objects are placed apart from ordinary living spaces, suggesting areas reserved for spiritual activity. Some caves contain depictions of hybrid human-animal figures, possibly representing guides or protective spirits invoked by shamans. These findings indicate that early humans were developing complex systems of thought, recognizing that the invisible world had its own rules and that individuals could serve as intermediaries to navigate them. Such leaders provided a framework of understanding that allowed the tribe to respond collectively to uncertainty, reinforcing social cohesion while fostering a sense of security. The shaman's role extended beyond crisis. They were custodians of spiritual knowledge, preserving rituals, songs, and symbols that connected generations. Their practices created a narrative of protection and meaning, transforming fear into structured engagement with the environment. In this way, early spiritual leaders were pivotal in shaping the cognitive and cultural evolution of humanity. They exemplified the earliest conscious effort to interact with the divine, not merely as observers of nature, but as active participants in a dialogue with protective forces that surrounded them. As early humans faced the inevitability of death, their understanding of protection extended beyond life itself. Burial practices reveal an emerging belief in an afterlife or spiritual continuity, suggesting that humans sought to safeguard not only the living, but also the departed. Imagine a small group carefully placing a loved one in a shallow grave, surrounding the body with stones, tools, or personal belongings. These were not mere acts of disposal. They were deliberate gestures of care, protection, and hope for a journey beyond the visible world. The effort invested in burial indicates that early humans recognized death as part of a larger cosmic order, one in which the dead could influence the living or require guidance themselves. Archaeologists have uncovered graves dating back tens of thousands of years, often containing ochre, shells, or animal remains. Such findings suggest symbolic intent, a belief that these objects could shield the deceased or serve as offerings to unseen powers. In some cases, bodies are positioned in ways that reflect social or spiritual significance, hinting at concepts of identity, status, and protection in both the present and the hereafter. Through these acts, humans were negotiating a relationship with forces they could not see, creating rituals that provided structure, meaning, and reassurance in the face of mortality. The awareness of death also reinforced communal bonds. Caring for the dead required cooperation, communication, and shared belief systems. By collectively acknowledging vulnerability, early humans cultivated empathy and social cohesion, understanding that protection extended not just to the individual, but to the group as a whole. Burial rites became a conduit for transmitting cultural and spiritual knowledge, teaching younger generations about the sacred and the protective role of ritual. These practices suggest a sophisticated imagination and a profound sensitivity to the forces governing life and death. Protection, for early humans, was not limited to avoiding immediate threats. It encompassed long-term spiritual foresight. They sought to maintain balance between the living and the dead, recognizing that unseen forces influenced the tangible world. How do you think these burial rituals shaped early human understanding of protection and the divine? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'm curious to hear your interpretations of these ancient practices. Fear and survival were inseparable in the lives of early humans, and this ever-present danger profoundly shaped the evolution of faith. Predators, harsh climates, and the unpredictability of the natural world created an environment in which protection was not just desirable, it was essential. Early humans responded by attributing meaning and intention to these forces, interpreting threats as part of a larger spiritual framework. Lightning might be seen as the anger of unseen powers, while the sudden disappearance of prey could signal divine displeasure. Through this lens, fear became a teacher, guiding humans to ritual, observation, and reverent action. The interplay between danger and belief is evident in early human behavior. Objects like amulets or painted symbols might have been used to ward off harm, while repetitive actions such as dance or chanting helped reinforce a sense of safety. These practices served a dual purpose. They provided psychological reassurance and communicated to the group that the individual was actively engaged with forces beyond the material world. By converting fear into ritual, humans exercised a form of control over uncertainty, embedding protective intentions into their daily lives. Danger also fostered creativity and cognitive innovation. Observing animal behavior, tracking patterns, and predicting environmental changes required sharp attention and analytical thinking. When these skills were combined with symbolic thought, early humans developed a spiritual system in which protective forces were both conceptual and practical. Hunting success, shelter selection, and communal cohesion were all influenced by these emerging beliefs, demonstrating that faith and survival were not separate domains, but deeply intertwined. This constant negotiation with fear shaped the collective psyche, instilling both humility and resilience. By externalizing threats as spiritual forces, humans could engage with the unknown in ways that were manageable and meaningful. Faith became a framework for interpreting randomness, a protective lens that helped early humans navigate the chaotic world around them. In this sense, danger and survival were catalysts for the earliest forms of religion, illustrating how necessity can drive the evolution of belief and the human quest for protection in an uncertain universe. As human societies grew and evolved, the transition from personal signs of protection to organized religious practices began to take shape. Small bands of hunter-gatherers gradually gave way to larger, more structured communities, and with this shift came the need for shared systems of belief. The protective rituals of the individual were now being integrated into collective practices that bound people together, creating early frameworks for communal spirituality. Imagine a growing settlement where multiple families gather around a fire not just to share warmth or food, but to participate in a coordinated act of devotion, offering thanks or seeking guidance from forces they believed watched over them all. This evolution did not erase the earlier emphasis on observation of nature. Rather, it expanded it. The signs once read personally, patterns in the eye, stars, animal behavior, or seasonal changes, were now interpreted within a collective narrative. Knowledge accumulated over generations became codified in stories, myths, and rituals that could be transmitted consistently. These narratives provided continuity and stability, allowing humans to feel protected not only by the immediate actions they took, but also by the broader shared understanding of divine forces. Community gatherings, ceremonial dances, and communal offerings reinforced both faith and social cohesion, embedding protection within the very structure of society. Symbols, rituals, and spiritual leaders all played a role in this transition. The individual experience of divine signs was amplified through the community, creating shared meaning and collective security. Protection was no longer a matter of personal intuition alone. It was validated by the group, mediated by leaders, and codified in shared practices. In essence, early humans were discovering that the power of faith could be multiplied when enacted together, linking survival, spirituality, and society in a complex web of understanding. This process laid the foundation for the organized religions that would emerge much later, showing that the human desire for protection and understanding is inherently social as well as spiritual. By observing, interpreting, and ritualizing the world together, early communities were crafting a shared path through uncertainty, one that balanced fear with hope and survival with reverence. By the time early humans were forming stable communities, the traces of faith that began millions of years ago had evolved into a rich tapestry of beliefs, rituals, and symbols. Protection was no longer just a personal pursuit. It had become a shared experience, woven into the daily lives of entire groups. Imagine a village gathering at the edge of a forest, observing celestial events, offering small tokens, and recounting stories of protective spirits. These practices were more than superstition. They were strategies for survival, cohesion, and understanding, uniting individuals under a common spiritual framework. Through these communal expressions, faith transformed into a guiding force, shaping behavior, decision-making, and relationships. Even as societies grew more complex, the core impulse remained unchanged. Humans sought signs of divine protection in a world filled with uncertainty. Mountains, rivers, animals, and the stars continued to be interpreted as messages, guiding choices, and reinforcing a sense of safety. Leaders and shamans, now embedded within larger communities, mediated between humans and the unseen, ensuring that protective wisdom was maintained, transmitted, and adapted to new circumstances. This interplay between observation, ritual, and leadership exemplifies the ingenuity of early human spirituality, a system that balanced fear with hope, survival with imagination. The legacy of these prehistoric beliefs is still visible today. Modern rituals, symbolic gestures, and collective faith practices echo the earliest efforts to interpret, influence, and find reassurance in a mysterious world. From cave paintings to communal ceremonies, humans have always sought connection with protective forces, crafting meaning and guidance from the intangible. Reflecting on this journey encourages us to consider how contemporary spiritual practices might trace their origins back to those first sparks of awareness, observation, and intention millions of years ago. If this exploration of early human faith inspired you, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment with your thoughts on which ancient protective ritual fascinates you most. And don't stop here. Check out our next video, Ancient Rituals and the Birth of Spiritual Thought, to continue tracing humanity's path from instinctive protection to organized belief.